Hello, this is Susan Smith Nash, and you're listening to the Fringe Journal. Today I'm going to read Chapter 1 from Todos Santos, and it's a novel that I wrote. And anyway, so the first chapter is called Salt and Memory. The future stretched before them like an ocean of possibility, infinite in its potential for exploration, patient in its willingness to support whatever forms consciousness might choose to become. The pool at the Norman Aquatic Center held Wisteria Vanish's secrets, the way the desert sand holds water, reluctantly but completely. At 5:30 a.m., the chlorinated silence wrapped around her like a familiar embrace as she sliced through the lanes marked by faded plastic ropes. Her platinum blonde hair, darkened by water, was held tight to her head by an aqua blue silicone Speedo swim cap. Stroke, 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 breathe. The rhythm had saved her from sanity for 32 years, through her mother's manic episodes and subsequent hospitalizations, through her doctoral dissertation on trauma psychology, through the worst phone call of her life 18 months ago, the one that began, "Mrs. Vanish, I regret to inform you that Staff Sergeant David Torres." Wisteria touched the pool's edge with fingertips that had once been strong enough to slice through water at collegiate championship speeds. Now they trembled slightly as she hauled herself from the water, her lean frame still carrying the broad shoulders and narrow hips of a serious swimmer. The morning sun, filtering through the aquatic center skylights, caught the water droplets on her skin like tiny prisms. Her mother had named her Wisteria because she thought it would sound poetic with their unusual surname, Vanish. Wisteria Vanish. Like something that might disappear in the wind or bloom unexpectedly against a garden wall. "Names have power, you know," her mother had said during one of her lucid periods between hospitalizations. "They tell the world who you might become." Wisteria did not quite believe her. She thought her mother used her name like an incantation. Oklahoma in early September still held summer's grip, the air thick with humidity that made the approaching autumn feel like a distant promise. Wisteria wrapped herself in her favorite thick terry towel, the same one she had used since graduate school, and padded barefoot across the concrete deck. The familiar scent of chlorine, the slapping of her flip-flops in the empty space provided a cocoon of normalcy she desperately needed. Her phone buzzed against the metal bench where she'd left it. Wisteria's stomach clenched. Early morning calls never brought you good news. She learned that lesson the hard way. "Dr. Vanish?" The voice was crisp, professional, with the hint of an East Coast accent. "This is Wisteria." "My name is Harrison Webb. I represent Vita Nuova Incorporated. We have a proposition that might interest you." Wisteria's grip tightened on the phone. Vita Nuova. She had heard the name whispered in academic circles, usually followed by raised eyebrows and uncomfortable silences. Biotech defense contractor. The name was darkly ironic, considering their work. New life, like Dante's poem about rebirth and redemption, but applied to military applications that had nothing to do with spiritual renewal. "I'm not looking for new clients right now," she said, pulling off her swim cap with her free hand and gathering up her swim bag to head into the showers. "This isn't about therapy, Dr. Vanish. We need someone with your particular background to investigate some unusual developments in Mexico, specifically in Baja California." Through the aquatic center's windows, Wisteria could see the University of Oklahoma campus stirring to life. Students with backpacks crossed the quad, their voices carrying across the morning air. Normal life, safe life, the kind of life she'd built carefully around her grief, like a levee against floodwaters. What kind of developments? Webb's pause lasted a heartbeat too long. The kind that might interest someone who's lost someone important to warfare. Wisteria's breath caught. The pool deck seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Her first reaction was an overwhelming rush of impotent rage. It would not do any good to let this stranger know, however, so she controlled her voice. How do you know about David? We know about a lot of things, Dr. Vanish, including your mother's condition, your dissertation on battlefield trauma, and your current client base of veterans with PTSD. You understand loss. You understand how far people will go to avoid it. The towel slipped from Wisteria's hands. Around her, the pool's surface had settled into a perfect stillness, reflecting the overhead lights like fallen stars. I'm listening. There's a man in Todos Santos, Mexico, a former combat medic named Holsby Asher. He's been making claims about reversing death, bringing back the recently deceased. Our sources suggest he might actually be succeeding. Wisteria's mind raced through the scientific impossibilities, the ethical violations, the sheer audacity of such a claim. But underneath her rational dismissal, something else stirred, a desperate hope she thought she'd buried with David. That's impossible. Is it? You're a trauma specialist, Dr. Vanish. You know that the line between life and death isn't always as clear as we like to believe. Sometimes it's more like a border that can be, well, for all intents and purposes, crossed. The morning sun had climbed higher, sending long shadows across the pool deck. Wisteria watched a maintenance worker drag a net through the water, collecting leaves that had fallen overnight. Such a simple task, removing the debris, keeping the water clean, if only healing worked the same way. What exactly are you asking me to do? Go to Todos Santos. Evaluate this Holsby Asher. Determine if his methods have any scientific basis. If they do, Webb's voice took on a different quality, softer but somehow more dangerous. If they do, we'd like to discuss a partnership. Wisteria made her way into the empty locker room. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror above the sinks, around the corner from the showers. There she was, hollow-eyed, blonde hair falling in damp tangles, wearing the expression of someone who'd been treading water for too long. She thought of David's last letter, still unopened in her bedroom drawer. She thought of her mother, who'd spent Wisteria's childhood disappearing into the locked wards of state hospitals, always chasing the promise of a cure that never came. I need time to think about it. Of course. But Dr. Vanish. Webb's voice carried a note of gentle insistence. Don't think too long. Some opportunities have expiration dates. The line went dead. Wisteria stood motionless in the locker room, thinking about the neat, even swim lanes where life's chaos could be held at bay, if only in the absence of external intrusions while swimming. No text messages, no news feeds, no unwelcome calls, at least while swimming laps. Now she had to face something unexpected. She'd spent her life studying the psychology of trauma, helping others navigate the landscape of loss. But she'd never imagined that someone might offer her a map back to the country of the living. Her phone buzzed. a text message from her assistants. Your 9 a.m. canceled. Mrs. Patterson's husband had another episode. Wisteria looked at her watch. 7:15 a.m. Time enough to drive home, change into clothes for work, and prepare for a day of helping others manage their grief, while her own remained a constant, gnawing presence. She gathered her things, her movements automatic from years of the same routine. But as she walked through the parking lot, Wisteria's reflection followed her in the aquatic center's windows. A woman suspended between water and air, between the life she'd built and the life she'd lost, between the rational world of psychology and the impossible promise of resurrection. The Oklahoma sky stretched endless above her, the color of David's eyes in morning light. Wisteria unlocked her Jeep, sat behind the wheel, key in the ignition, but engine silent. Around her, the world continued its normal rotation, but she felt herself standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable, like a swimmer preparing for a dive into dark water. She thought of her mother's journal, filled with poetry written during manic episodes, beautiful, terrible verses about drowning and flying, about the thin membrane between sanity and madness. Wisteria had inherited that gift for words, though she'd learned to channel it into sonnets instead of symptoms. What if the dead could speak? She'd written in her own journal the night after David's funeral. What would they say to those who remain? Now, sitting in her Jeep in the parking lot of the Norman Aquatic Center, Wisteria wondered if she was about to find out. So that was chapter 1 of Todos Santos, and this is Susan Smith Nash. You're listening to the Fringe Journal.